What is going on, gaming nerds? Welcome back to Midnight Gaming with Designare. Thanks for coming to the channel and hanging out. Hopefully you guys are having an amazing day. I'm having a pretty decent day. It is midnight yet again, and yet again we are back on Russian Fishing 4. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk a little bit about rotational speed and gear ratio and what the heck they actually are. Let's get started. Okay, so to start off with rotational speed, what exactly am I talking about? If I go into my inventory and I go into my reels, you guys are probably looking at this gear ratio, or rotational speed is what I like to call it. This gear ratio, what is this exactly? Basically, this needs to be read backwards. It's kind of a ratio that tells you how fast you're reeling in line. Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to put some numbers up here. So let's say 4.3 to 1. So basically what you're doing is the first number, which is on the far right side, is a 1. Basically what it's saying is, the way you read it backwards is, for every one rotation of your reel, okay, so it doesn't matter what you're talking about your rotation. It's one rotation of your hand, one rotation of your reel's handle, one rotation of your spool, one rotation of your mechanism, one rotation of your reel, which I believe it's actually one rotation of your spool. For every one rotation of your spool, you're going to be pulling in 4.3 centimeters of line. And now I do believe it's centimeters. I don't think it's inches. It's definitely not meters or feet. So it's either centimeters or inches. I believe it's centimeters. So for every one rotation of your spool or of your reel, you're going to be pulling in 4.3 centimeters of line. Okay, and that's how it's kind of read backwards. Now, let's say that you have a rotational speed of 6.0 to 1, meaning for every one rotation of your reel, you're going to be pulling in 6 centimeters of line. That is a very, very fast reel. Okay, there's a few reels that are actually like that on the tackle shop. Now, is that a good thing? Well, a lot of people will actually purchase their reels based off of the speed of the reel. The gear ratio 5.0, 6.0, and the way that they see it is, the faster that they reel, the faster they reel in the fish. The faster you reel in the fish, the faster you land the fish. The faster you land the fish, the faster you can throw out your lure or your bait again and possibly catch another fish, and you're going to increase your fish per hour caught. Is that a good thing? Yes. Is it a bad thing? Yes. What am I talking about? Well, basically what it comes down to with gear ratio is, it's a good thing when your gear ratio can be high, okay? And like look at the Adriatic. It's got a 6.1 gear ratio. When your gear ratio is high and you're fishing for light-bodied fish, bream, gibble, crucian carp, stuff like that, just even like Xanders are fairly light, Volga Xanders, stuff like that. Your real gear ratio, your gear ratio at a high speed like 6.1 to 1 is actually good, because you can bring in your fish faster, okay? And that'll increase your fish caught per hour because you can get your bait back out there faster. However, when it comes to fat fish, fat-bodied fish, carp, sturgeon, catfish, stuff like that, this is a very bad thing to have a high gear ratio. That's why a lot of people, when they start getting into carp fishing and stuff like that, they like what I like to call a low and slow gear ratio, or low and slow rotational speed. Like the Adriatica, which is 6.0 to 1, that is kind of all about speed and fast reeling, okay? With a gear ratio on the Beluga Narga, which is 4.3, it's not about speed, it's about a lower speed that incidentally actually causes kind of more of a torque. It's not as about speed, it's more about torque. So you have a slower rotational speed. Now, why is that important for a fat-bodied fish? Well, think about it this way. Let's say that you're reeling in a big fat carp that you've just fought down to nothing. He's completely exhausted, he's turned upside down, belly up, you're trying to reel him in, and you've got a rotational speed of like 6.0 or 6.1. Your rotational speed is going to be too fast compared to how heavy the fish is. So as you're reeling in, because your reel speed is so fast, what's going to happen is your reel speed is going to overpower your brake and cause your spool to spool backwards. Okay, in that type of scenario, you're no longer getting your 6.0 rotational speed. You're actually getting like around 3.0 rotational speed, because for every time that you do one rotation, your spool will unspool backwards, basically half of that 6.0 centimeters of line. So you're actually getting about 3.0 to 1 rotational speed instead of 6. On top of that, because you are spinning your spool and unspooling your spool, you're actually doing more damage to your spool. Every time that your spool unspools like that, you're actually doing damage to it. So when you've got a super fast rotational speed like that, what you're actually doing is unspooling your spool on a fat-bodied fish, and you're doing more damage to your spool, and you're actually slowly reeling in your fish twice as slow as if you were to have like a beluga narga, like I've got right here, which is a 4.3 gear ratio. With a lower gear ratio, because you're reeling slower, you're actually pulling the fish in slower, and you're not overpowering your brake with that slower gear ratio. Okay, so when you're actually considering, beluga, fishing for beluga or sturgeon or carp, sometimes even buffalo can be heavy enough where a fast gear ratio will unspool your spool as you're reeling it in. A fat-bodied fish is going to be better fought and better reeled in with a lower gear ratio, around 4.5. 5.0 is kind of a cutoff, I like to say, for carp and stuff like that. 5.0 is a little bit too high for carp, but you get down to a 4.5, 4.3, 3.0, then those are really great for super heavy fat-bodied fish. But if you go above a 5, then you'd probably be better concentrating more on, basically fish that have a lighter body, like bream and stuff like that. Let me see if I can find... Where's my beluga? There we go. What do we got here on the gear ratio on this one? Okay, so this is a 5.4. See, the Sputnik pulsars, you're not going to be using these to go for carp fishing. You really shouldn't be. That's why I tell people, don't use these down at Bear. Don't use these down, down carp fishing on Oldberg and stuff like that, because the gear ratio is actually fairly high, and that's one of the things you're going to have a problem with, is even though you tire out the fish, you're still going to be kind of unspooling yourself at a 5.4 gear ratio. Okay, so with carp, what it comes down to is a lot of people have already kind of done the research when it comes down to carp and stuff like that. So when the higher level players suggest like a beluga narga or an HSV and stuff like that, we already know that they have low slow gear ratios, and that low slow gear ratio is good for carp fishing, is good for heavy body fishing. We know that it's going to be fine on the gear ratio. It's not going to be too fast, it's not going to overpower the brake, and you should be, for the most part, fine. Are there fish that are heavy enough that can, even though the gear ratio of a beluga narga is 4.3, are there fish that are heavy enough that can overpower the brake even with that slow gear ratio or that slow rotational speed? Yes, there are. I've caught them. I caught a 34 kilogram mirror on this bad boy, and I had a hell of a time reeling it in, and I destroyed most of my reel by reeling it in because it was too heavy compared to the gear ratio. Okay, so that is what gear ratio is. When you actually look at your reels, you're probably not looking at the gear ratio very much. That is absolutely fine. If it comes down to, your line capacity, your line capacity, your drag weight, your mech weight, stuff like that, those are the super important things. But as kind of an afterthought, kind of look at it at your gear ratio and be like, okay, would this actually be a good reel for what I want to fish? What type of fish I want to fish for? Is it a light bodied fish like a bream or a zander or something like that, or is it a heavy body like a catfish or carp or something like that? If you like the video and you learned something, consider hitting the subscribe button. It would the subscribe button and the like button. I would really appreciate it. It helps me out a lot. Let me know what you guys actually like to see. As always, remember, keep gaming, keep doing it, and I have a blast. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care, have a good one, and bye-bye.